Welcome to the Arboricultural Association's webinar this evening with me, your one-eyed host, John Parker, Chief Exec at the Association. Please do use the chat to say hello. Use the Q&A box for your questions, please, because if you put them in the chat, I will lose track of them and they probably won't be asked. Thank you once again, of course, to Steel, who is sponsoring this webinar series. Thank you, Steel. As I'm sure you're all aware, this evening we're once again handing over control of proceedings to the one and only Ted Green. If you haven't yet bought his book, Tree Time, then what have you been doing? Yeah, go for it. Exactly. Get online and order your copy now. Ted covered the costs of producing this book, and all proceeds from sales go to the association to support our charitable work. So please go and get yourself a copy. It makes a great Christmas present. Why not buy 5 or 6 of them? Next week, we welcome Jeremy Barrell, who will be offering some practical tree management wisdom from his career. And then the following week, we go for something rather different. We'll be welcoming Heather Craddock and Maria Chiara Pastore. Heather will be giving us a fascinating presentation, and I know that because I've seen it, called Empire Forestry in Colonial Jamaica, the Absence and Agency of the Ackee Tree. Well worth a watch. And Maria will be telling us another fantastic presentation about her phytoremediation work on trees in Milan. Please don't miss those. Register free right now, and then there's loads more throughout the rest of the series that you can find information about online. And as mentioned last week, please do consider signing up to be a member of the association in order to support all of the wonderful work we do, including these very webinars. So I'm off to bathe my eye in bleach. And in the meantime, it's my pleasure to welcome once again my dear friend, Ted Green. Ted, it is over to you.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. I've always enjoyed talking to arbs. I used to call it shouting at arbs. And really speaking, I suppose I've devoted my life now to raising the profile of arboriculture in the world, because I've always noticed ever since I met you that you have a very low esteem. And yet you should be up there with every forester. You should be up there with everybody in the ecology. In fact, I'll get round to talking about the book in a minute, or what we're about to do. But I've got something on the screen which says a non-arborist view. Well, that's me. I am not an arborist. And by not being an arborist, I think it gives me more weight and kudos to actually promote arboriculture. Yes, sir. Next slide, please. Oh. Next slide. Yeah. So just to put this one in, he's cleared off. But I thought you'd like this because I like to go to the conferences, and the last one was really good. I really did enjoy it. And at the end of it, John said thank you to all the staff that had helped. And I want to say, on behalf of the people in the audience, yes, I agree to say thank you to the staff. But who actually ever says thank you to the CEO? And there he is. He's selling my book, but the bugger's asleep. Can you see that? So what a CEO to sleep. And he's not reacting now anyway. And there's good old Kate. I don't know how many we sold, but we've got well over 1,000 now. And as I say, the whole of the profits are going back into arboriculture, and almost certainly we want to spend it on 2 more books, and one of them is going to be Treecology, but I've changed the name tonight to Open Grown Treecology, meaning because arbs look after open grown trees. The trees in woodlands and whatever are foresters, and you ain't foresters. You are tree doctors in open grown trees. Okay, so a brief history and why I don't see myself as an arborist. There's me, and talking to a chicken, and that was my first lesson in wildlife and natural history. And please know I'm wading about in E. coli and probably got finger licking hands and all the rest of it. And there you go, talking to a chicken, my first lesson in wildlife. And these are the sort of trees which I was running about amongst and playing in. I go and play in that and hide. And that's the sort of trees we've still got at Windsor. So can you imagine, from an early age, I was accustomed to these magnificent old ancient trees, but somewhere along the line, I started asking questions. And here you go. Now, forget the conifers in the background, but that is a public footpath. And there is an ancient monolith at Windsor, and I climbed up into that 80 odd years ago. 80, probably 84 years ago, I climbed into that and it was dead. So just to show people, and these are the sort of things which we can do in Britain, is you can go and look at old trees and see the aging process and whatever, which a lot of other countries can't do. So really the experience in tree care of old trees is primarily British, although we now do have a lot to do with the Spanish people, and I'll probably get round to that. But remember, those conifers weren't there, and that is a public footpath, and it's as sound as a bell as far as moving in the ground. And I put this one in because this really starts me off now, because of my background in not talking to arborists, I had come up with lots and lots of if you like, questions and formed answers towards them. And this shows two primates, and one of them thinks he's superior to the other, meaning that a man thinks he's superior to all beings. And it's the worst thing that ever happened, because in doing so, we're quite happy to, if you like, destroy the planet. Because this really is what I've been trying to do in this talk tonight, is actually question and statements. So whatever I say tonight, it's not really questioning what arbs do, but what it's trying to get them to do also is to ask questions. Just ask questions, because the tree world is phenomenally exciting, and what's out there, and arborists, young arborists, old arborists swinging about in trees must have questions. But do they ever ask them? Or do they just keep them in and just listen to what other people say? Like here, man-made laws. All the work we listen to now, it's man-made. It's not nature, but it's not saying it's wrong. But if we try and ask what nature is doing, and the sweeping statements which we make are phenomenal. And so I've got one example. And this happened in my lifetime. We decided that animals, horses, cows, sheep, goats, rabbits even, ate grass. But if in my lifetime, I remember the old hay meadows, and most of those old hay meadows had less than 30% grass, whereas now we make our animals eat grass. So all those have gone, and I often talk to people on horseback and say, do you have a vet come and file the teeth of your horses? And they say, yes, of course. But I said, but you go to the Serengeti, you don't see the buffalo and the zebra having the vets chasing them around, filing their teeth, because they're eating natural food. Natural grass is only a part of what animals eat. So there you go. And this is a great picture for me, because that is a sallow. Sallow means salicylic acid or salicylic acid. It means aspirin. It means medicine. And there is a cow going to that tree, and she's self-medicating. So I often wonder whether man, when he was taking his animals round, when he was a pastoral nomadic herdsman, he watched his animals and he saw a dodgy one and it wandered up and started eating something. And I wonder whether that person said, well, I'm going to try that. Maybe good for me. So I like to think that medicine started with man looking at animals and seeing what they eat. And there you go. This is Reg Harris, which is where we're doing tree hay, because we're trying to get back and get arbs more interested in tree hay and feeding it to the animals. So this cow is a free-range longhorn. I call it a happy cow, and with a happy calf. And she heard or saw Reg up the tree cutting, and came over, pushed us away, and started eating the lop and top. So why aren't you doing it more for animals? You'll give them a luxury. And there's me feeding a couple of cows, free-range cows, happy cows, and feeding them on browse. So browse was fundamental to many animals, but we've stopped them doing it and making the poor bloody things eat grass. So seeing is believing. This is, many people have heard me go on about this, but this is from Maripolis. So seeing is believing. Most arborists seeing that would automatically say, oh, the tree's got to go. But by cutting that tree down, we're losing what actually does go on. And let's face it, even if Maripolis is a pathogen, and I'm adamant it's not, but even if it was a pathogen, why has that tree got it? And if it's got Maripolis, is there anything as an arborist that you can do, if you like, to help the tree? It's that you're the arborist, you're the tree doctors. Nobody else is going to do it. So that is my question. Think about, do I have, if it is a pathogen, and as I say, I maintain it's not, if it is, then what can you do instead of cutting it down? Because by cutting it down, we lose the evidence. And there you go. So it's a pathogen of a brick wall. Oh, what are we going to do? A pathogen of a brick wall. And there, look, get out the, what is it? The PCOS. It's whole. It's killing that pillar, that stone, that brick pillar. Oh dear, get the PCOS out quickly. So we've got to ask questions. We must keep on asking. Why is it doing it? What is it doing? How did it do it? What's it? Please ask questions. Don't take what I say or anybody else says as gospel. Think about it. You are arborists and you need to exercise your little brains into big brains and start thinking about things. And there you go. So this is a tree which 40 years ago, I'd say, had Maripolis all the way around it. And it was decaying the roots. Not necessarily as a pathogen, but it was decaying the roots. Because of where it was, there was no paranoia about cutting it down, and it got left. And look what we've got today. A perfectly healthy beech tree on perfectly healthy roots. Start thinking out of the box. And there you go, another one. And two lots of roots. Look, it's got these big buttress roots, and you can see younger roots inside the tree congregating. Again, that was Maripolis. And I put this one in because this actually is a well-known wood or dead wood decayer. And it's come out of the base of a root plate when the tree fell over. But it was not a pathogen. But if most people saw that, they'd automatically think, oh, it's killed the roots. No, it did not kill the roots. It's incapable of doing it. And so we want you to start looking more at what you see. And there you go. So many years ago, that's Helen Leonard. She's a tree officer. Neville's in the middle with his sitting in the middle. Everybody knows Neville, and that's Mike Ellison, and everybody knows them. So when we heard about the tempest, they call it a tempest in France, the great tempest, which blew for 2 days in France, we said, let's go and see. And this is one of the trees we found in Fontainebleau, which everybody should go and see. It's changing as we speak, but it's still worth going to see. So go out and look. Go out with an open mind. Get the experience and go out. and many of you have had lots and lots of experience, but have you really thought about them? And going on, so this is a picture of one of the early Ancient Tree Forum meetings, which was quite a collection of people actually, but several arborists gave up a day's pay to come and talk trees to other people interested in old trees. So this is an oak which was standing in old pasture, very, very old pasture. It's never been ploughed. And for some reason, the National Trust had decided to plough it. And if you look at the right-hand side of the picture, you can see an individual in a trench. But what he's actually doing, he's holding up a root. And that root is as thick as a broomstick. And the other thing about it was the same length and, the same diameter from the tree trunk where the people are standing to where that person's at the other end of the on the right hand side of the picture. We couldn't go any further because there was a fence. But so what is a root? With no taper, nothing, just a solid root for over, well, what I don't want to say, 25, 30, 40 meters. So when you think roots, start thinking, if they're given a chance, do they, why and how? And these are all the questions which are not answered. And if they are, they should, every pronouncement should be chewed over by arborists, everybody. And that is why we've now formed the Thinking Arbs, and getting as many of you as possible to come and stand under a tree like that. And let's hear your opinions. Your opinions. And I could have started this talk with a quote from Lynn Boddy, you know, the mycologist, our lovely Lynn, and say one of her favourite sayings is, even when she's talking about mushrooms, is, and decay, is, we don't know. So we're taking at face value what we're told and talk about, but do we really know? And this is where arborists could be out on their own and talking and sharing experiences and opinions, and nobody will think you're stupid. That's the first thing. Nobody will think you're ignorant, because we don't know. What Lynn's finding out is brilliant stuff. But in many cases, you say, this is what I've found, but we still don't know. Remember that. Stick it on your wall or in the van. Yeah, so I put these in because they're just question marks. Because I've no idea why, especially ash. This is, I think, is an oak tree, and it's an oak pollard in Sicily. And why some trees do this. Many, there are theories. One of them is that it's a hard, compacted soil underneath. But if that tree's doing it, then why aren't the other ones doing it? So that's a question for you. Tell me or explain what you think those big roots are for. And I've just got a couple more like that as well. Next one, please. There you go. I think that's, I'm not sure where it is. It's Hampton Court or it's Windsor, but there's a beech tree, and most of those roots on the top of the surface are on one side. So why? What are they doing? Are there any advantages to a tree to be able to do that? Is that where they store their starch reserves? Is it easier to do it when the root is on the top surface? There are 30, 40, 50 questions you can ask, and we can discuss why trees have roots on the surface. Another one, all on one side, look. So what's that all about? And that's quite a small tree. I was going to say it's a young tree, but we've no idea. But the root is bigger than the trunk. Is that a place for storing reserves for, adverse weather or climate, summer and winter? I don't know. You tell me. You ask. Go and look at a tree. Have a look at it. Bore it. Somebody put a bore in it and see what happens in that. And yes, so I'm rustling through these, so we're obviously going to get a few questions at the end of it. But I was photographing that fallen sweet chestnut stump. So it was a big tree, and it fell over. And that was in the 87 hurricane. And whilst I was taking the picture, I realised that the trees in the background are more or less in a wood. They're all sweet chestnuts, but they're all stag-headed. And I'm fairly certain that the stag-headedness came about from the 87 hurricane, but the trees didn't die. So they're all responding and leaving the parts of the tree which died still up in the canopy. So that gave me a lot of thought. What's going on? And of course, I love it. Broken roots. So you could argue that this is a result of high winds. The trees oscillate a bit in the ground and eventually they break their roots and they fall over. Okay, yes, next one, please. And this is a result of the 87 hurricane, the French tempest, where it left trees in the ground, but it shredded them. So this is a case where I think the tree did not break roots, but took all the damage in the limbs. Okay, but it's still got its roots in the ground. And there's one that actually is a human shred, but it does tell the sort of story very similar to the one before, where the limbs are blown off, but the tree remains firm in the ground and puts on new shoots and becomes a tree again. So it's now getting you people to start thinking that 50% of the tree, if we include the microorganisms like the mycorrhiza, 50% of the tree is under the ground. And you are only looking at the other 50%, which we can see. So it's time you started looking underground. And this is my best picture. This is from the 87 hurricane. And what you can see there is that the tree snapped its limbs, and they're all over 2 meters away from the trunk, and they put on a new crown. The old crown is one limb. So what happened there is that the shock of the wind, except for that one limb, was taken in the crown, and the roots remained intact. The one limb where the roots broke, you can see what happened. You've got a poor limb going off on the left-hand side. So you've got to start looking at this. This is what you should be looking at. And you can still see these trees all over the south of Britain. Go and read them. Go and look at them. And I think it's wonderful stuff. But look, stub ends. We'll get to that in a minute. And there you go. So roots intact, broken limbs. Okay? I always get these confused, so you'll have to work it out for yourself. And of course, there you go. And I've been on about this ever since I've got involved with arborists, is why do you cut to the branch collar? When the animal which evolved to leave stub ends, because presumably by leaving stub ends, when you live the beavers live on these trees. So they cut them winter, summer, drought, whatever. But what they found is in evolution, the place to cut them so that you get the coppice to grow again is by leaving stub ends. And in every case, you can see they leave one on. So if you go to that right-hand thing, you can see where in the past, there's 2 quite thick trunks coming up, but behind them, in the center of the coppice stall, you can see the smaller diameter ones. So they don't cut it all in one year. And I'd have great debates with coppicers. They want to. They actually want to throw me out, really, because they have all been now brought up on a chainsaw. And all of you are taught to fell a tree to the closest you can get to the ground. Why? Because you're trained by a forester that wants maximum timber to take away. But arborists and conservationists, why are you cutting to the ground? You don't need to. And the old coppicers anyway, with a billock, and I used to use a billock. You try cutting with a billock all day because the stub ends get bigger and bigger, and you can't do it anyway. So you do leave stub ends. So the old coppicers actually were copying beavers. So there you go. And why do you do trees as well? Cut them to, come on. This is the 21st century. Why are you doing it? I mean, I'm just showing you pictures of trees which have got stub ends, anything up to 2 meters away from the tree. And that's nature. And this is nature. And if you ain't failing nature, you ain't good arborist as far as I'm concerned, because you've got to watch what the trees do and the animals and whatever it is that rely on them. And this one, I don't know. You can tell me all about this yourself. But it's got a crown which looks iffy. That 1 or 2 limbs going up and the rest of the tree looks brilliant. I'm not sure, but I can virtually see that most of those horizontal branches and that are stub ends from a gale. But I like it. I like it because this is showing how a tree in those high winds in a very exposed place can still cope and recover. And then, I don't know, they're all out of order now. That shows you broken roots and the crown reducing. So these are all ones that you can go and look at for yourself and start maybe even mimicking it on trees, or look at the tree and say, okay, I can see now that had broken roots back in 1987, and then start doing things accordingly. I don't know. Up to you lot. And this is probably the only picture I should keep. But if you look at the left-hand side, you can see stub ends and you can see young, vigorous growth right up to the top. If you look on the right-hand side, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 iffy, thin crowned or thin branches. I maintain that side had got broken roots and the other side has got stub ends and the roots are intact. That is the picture actually I should use. So that is all around you. When you go out to do a tree or a tree inspection, start looking at that, because many of the trees will show you the effects, at least of the 87 hurricane, even things before that, like in the days when I was a kid and we had ice storms and stuff like that. Most of you have never experienced an ice storm unless you come from Canada or somewhere like that now, but they used to suffer from them. And just two or three pictures just to show you trees recovering after losing limbs. So you've got the old recovery and the young recovery. And they're again the same. You've got the old part of the tree and the part of the tree which is really responding. These are trees that you can learn from, or you can ask the questions and you can tell me. I want to know. I don't know, but it's the sort of thing that we should be looking at. Just a picture. Can talk about it. And then there's this one, which is I'm going to go on about later on, but it's wood pasture. And it's the open grown tree. And that's you. Nobody else has experienced or does anything about open grown trees. If they do, they don't know what they're talking about. because that is where you are. You were with the open grown tree. And I put the fungi in and then the happy colours because some of you like eating them and jumping out of windows and that sort of stuff. But it's just to show you. And of course, the open grown tree and the old open grown tree, which you can find in some of our ancestral parks, is biological continuity, which we're just beginning to understand, and what part plants play in, or trees play in biological continuity. So this is some work. It was Emma Gilmartin's PhD. She now works for the AA, and she did this with Lynn Boddy. Oh, you all know, and if you don't, you should. And this is some of the things that they found where the fungi were present in the living tree, because it was a living tree until it blew over, and we sectioned it up. So I'm going to leave that because that is the sort of thing which we've got to get Lynn on. I heard Lynn the other day, and I really enjoyed her talk, which was really just on fungi and trees. Not mycorrhiza, but sorry, I should have said decay fungi, or recyclers as I call them, and old trees. And she's got to do that. So she's earmarked to do one for the AA, and don't miss it is the answer. Whatever you do, do not miss it, because this picture here is absolutely fascinating. Because when you look at, I'm looking down the fungi, and all of them are decayers, and yet they're in some of the solid wood, and so they are Lynn's latent fungi. But I don't want to take it away from Lynn or Emma. That's their work. Let them talk about it. And yeah, I just want to tinker with this one because I'm supposed to be asking questions. But many of you will understand the word to cleave, and that is where trees are split vertically up the tree, and they split. Once you start it, they split naturally. And I like to stick my neck out and say that where the trees are split naturally, they don't break or damage the cells. The cells remain intact, and that wood is renowned for not rotting. It's when it's cut with a saw or an axe and you cut across the cells that you start to get the decay. So I want you to start thinking about this. I think Reg has tried a bit of tree pulling. We tried tree pulling many years ago to split the limbs where you can do it, and you've got the time to do it, and they don't decay, and they last for years. Cleaved wood lasts for years. But these are still supposed to be questions, and this shows you I think it's called arbuscular, where the twigs break off naturally. But again, when you look at it, these blew off a tree, oak tree. You can still see the cleaved. Sorry, the wood is will not. They will decay around where the arbuscular. I'm getting it wrong, but anyway, that's decay caused by a fungus, arbuscular, and it's common in oak. But where it rips away from the tree, that will not decay, and I'll stake what reputation I've got on that. Yeah, my favourite. This goes back to 87, and this is a tree which gave me the idea of talking about the Eiffel Tower oak. And lots of them do it, and it's hollow, and it's hollowing by a mushroom. I'm not going to give you the name because they keep changing them anyway. That's where I gave up with the taxonomy in mushrooms, because I ended up calling them name changers, because all they were interested in doing was changing the name and not thinking, what does it do? What's going on? All those sort of questions. They never asked them. All they wanted to do was tick boxes and call it different names. So here it is, stick to the Eiffel Tower tree, and that tree is completely hollow right to the top. well, right up until some of the big branch junctures. And that went through the 87 hurricane. Just behind it, you can see some fences. They are where the young oaks have been planted, which blew down in the 87 hurricane. And they've gone, of course. And that's so you've got to start thinking about how much experience you can have, or we have, with hollow trees. And I keep on about it, but you buy these PCOS and all that, and that sort of thing. You don't stick to the rubber hammer. You read what it says, and the instruments are better than God, and they're not. And here you go. So in the French Tempest, we went, and this is Versailles, and that is a tree which blew over. And please note, it came out of the ground. It didn't break with the hollow. The hollow is good. And you can see for yourself how much wood was left in there. So that tree was able to, if you like, twist and turn and adapt to movement, which I can't get across to arbs. Once they become hollow, every new growth ring is more adaptable to movement. And so the wind was being taken up in the tree, and then the sail, bang, over it came. It didn't break, didn't snap. And that is the sort of thing which, go out and look. Shigo said it. Go out and look. And this is another one. Alan Rayner called this corrugation might be an armillaria species doing it. But what it said for me is, next time you've got some cardboard which is corrugated, wrap it up in a ball and see how strong it is. But it's not flexible. That's the only other thing. So that shoots my argument in the ground. So there you go. Another type of hollowing. And that was the tree. It was a tree they were trying to monolith because the arborists of the day didn't like the hollowing at the base. A bit like most of you, they would see that as, whoa, dangerous, dangerous. So what they did was they reduced the crown and were trying to pull the tree to break it, to shatter it and give it a natural monolith, which is the sort of thing we like. So it's keeping the tree, part of the tree in the ground for wildlife biodiversity. But you can see what happened. It blew over. It got pulled over. Amazing. So again, it's still this fear of hollowing, and Klaus Matek says that the two, where the barking goes round back into the tree, he talks about those being the strongest part of the tree. And if you look at your car door when you go out, you'll see they crimp the edges of them to make them stronger. But look where the decay had got to and stopped. You know, start looking at the trees instead of cutting them down. Yeah, so just a few more. Who's looking at hollow roots? Tell me about it. I don't know. There's a hollow root. And there's some more hollow roots. Tell me about them. What's hollow roots? Tell me about them, please. Please. I know that normally what happens is you get some movement on the undersurface, and the growth rings on the undersurface are incredibly tight because they're taking all the weight of the tree above them. And so when you get a slight abrasion or movement in those roots, that is where you get an entry point into the tree and it starts to decay. And of course, that's mostly with trees without heartwood or rightwood. And we never really, in the debates we never really talk about what can be different in these trees, and that is oak and sweet chestnut and yew have heartwood, heartwood, and trees that don't, the bulk of the trees have ripewood, which means that the decay in the tree can be anywhere. And whereas in heartwood, normally it's the centre of the tree which decays first. These are the wrong way round, but never mind. Now, this is something which several people have noted themselves, David Lonsdale, John White, and people like that, that in many cases, this is oak, by the way, in many cases, when a tree gets over a certain girth, the growth rings become so small, it's the same area, but because of the distance, they start to separate. And these were called Lonsdale columns. But the first person that showed me it was ex-dendrologist, a great man actually, a great tree man, ex-dendrologist of the Forestry Commission called John White. He first pointed this out to me. Now, the fire is because it had a lightning strike. And they called the fire brigade out. And of course, they wanted to cut the tree down, or cut it up to get at the thing. And of course, they did it. Whereas when this was done at Richmond, one of the lady wardens or rangers had a tree like this on fire, and the brooms arrived. As you realise, the fire brigade don't get much chance to use chainsaws, so they were starting up their chainsaws to cut this tree down because it was on fire inside. And the woman said, "Have you got a shovel?" And they gave her a shovel, and in 2 minutes she blocked up all the holes and put the fire out. So yeah, and that was an arborist lady, well, tree lady anyway. So there's what happens when the columns separate out, and that's what you get. And so the next shot is this tree. There it is, but it was a massive oak pollard, and then look at the limbs on it, and that was standing perfectly all right on that. And if you put a PCOS on that, you'd run away because you'd be so afraid about what it was telling you. But you were not looking at the tree. And look, it had big limbs quite low down. And this is, so if we get another event at Windsor, every arb should come and see this tree and then go away and chew it over and think about it yourself. And you'll throw your PCOS in the ditch. We've got to start looking more at trees and not just, if you like, taking a hollow tree or a decaying tree as bad news. They're there for a reason, and you are the people that are there to look after them and manage them. They don't have to be put on the floor, but that's a cheap way out. Right, just a few more. These are ones I don't know anything about. This is a lightning strike. What happens to that wood now, that exposed wood? From memory, nothing. It just will probably heal over a bit with the bark. And I think I can show you that in the next one. And there you go. There's a lightning strike healing over. Tree's okay. There you go. That, in fact, is something we don't seem to get in Britain, but that's a frost crack. And that's from Eastern Europe. So that is apparently what happens after a very cold winter. The tree is incredibly cold, and one day it's winter, the next day, this is Central Europe, one day it's winter, next day is spring, the next day it's summer. And this is what can happen. And the people that I was with, the Polish people, said that when these cracks appear, they sound like a gunshot. But when we looked at them, not one of them appeared to have any fungal fruiting bodies or anything like that. But go out and look. Another one. And there it is. That's a bit newer. Amazing. It goes quite a long way in as well. And these, tell me about these. This is where you come in now. There's the shears. Do you call them shears or twisting the tree? Tell me about it. I want to know, because so many of these trees are still there. I've got trees at Windsor, and you go wherever you go, you can find them. First of all, though, I don't like looking under the tree now at bracken. Bracken I see as one of the major problems for trees now, because it's taken over everywhere, and not only is it a competitor for minerals and nutrients under the tree, but the mulch or the litter builds up. The thatch, it's called, builds up. It becomes an interceptor for rain, and then in the summer, when the shoots are high and it's got big fronds, that comes another competitor for rain. So all in all, and of course fire, all in all, bracken is really bad news. But I don't know what we do now, because they've stopped the herbicides you could use. So yeah, there's a lovely one. That's lovely. But I looked in that, and the wood was, dare I say it, perfectly okay. There was no fungi. So yeah, okay. So this is a picture at NEP, the first real serious rewilding that happened in the UK, where the farmer Charlie took the whole estate out of intensive arable and put it into non-intervention. And this particular field, he actually sowed on both sides. So it's an old traditional footpath. And being a good farmer, he'd never ploughed it. He'd never used herbicide or fertilizer or pesticides on the footpath. But the fields, of course, were poison. So this is 3 years after he sowed it with grasses and whatever, and he let the pigs out. So these are free-range, happy pigs. And what did they do? They came and they only ploughed for food the footpath. So meaning that 3 years on, those fields on either side had literally nothing in them that was worth for the pigs. So I called this picture "If Pigs Could Only Speak." And it's gone round the world and lots of people have seen it. And it's just showing really the state of the soils of the world. And we've done it in 30 years. No, we've done it since the 50s. So that's what? That's 70 years. 70 years we've destroyed the soils of the planet. And that's 3 years on. So will they ever become the soils of the old farming practices? I've no idea. Yeah. So I am a disciple of wood mulch. Everywhere I go, I see very, very positive reactions to using wood mulch. So Jamie Simpson down at NEP and me decided on trying an experiment on putting down wood mulch, but in 4/4 or 4/8 of the field, and let's see what happened. So there you go. So we did it to several trees. Let's see. So this is the next one. So this is like 3-4 years later, and they let the pigs out again. And where did they go? They went to where the wood mulch had been put down. So there's a question for you. And that's one to take home and think about. What happens when you use wood mulch to the organisms in the soil and the soil for them to be happy for the pigs? And what are the benefits are they to the tree? I think they're incredible benefits. But I don't know. You're the arbs. You do it. Next one, please. So just to get on a bit now, another arb whose name's just gone straight out of my head. Tony, Jill? Tony? I can't hear. Anyway, just think of it in a minute. Tony, Ah,
Croft.
no, I don't know. Anyway, so he said that what he was finding with burrs on oak, that there was always beefsteak with them. So I thought that's interesting. But we get burrs on other trees as well. But then that made it more interesting. And then I thought, well, why do we assume that, if you like, the beefsteak fungus is only has one role? Why doesn't it have other roles? Why does it have more roles? So can you imagine that this could be? It's on I don't know what the tree is. It's on that tree. It's caused these big burrs. Can we have the next slide, please? And here's here's a birch tree with bird's nest on it. Yeah, yeah. I can't get witch's broom. And I think, well, why doesn't? Could it be that the beefsteak fungus has more than one role or affects trees in different ways? Because here it's got it's got witch's broom. It could not be, but what I'm trying to say is that we can ask these questions because, as Lynn Body says, we don't know. And this is the sort of thing which you can go out and think about and try and push arboriculture along, please. Really push it along. So this is another tree, which, if you like, is an oak. It's got burrs, but it's got masses of epicormic growth. So that, in fact, if you like, is very similar to witch's broom. And you can have two trees right next to each other. One has got burrs and epicormic growth, and the other one is as smooth as a gun barrel. These are the sort of things which, go out and think about them. Your opinion or your ideas, your suggestions are important, because if we want to move treecology, which I'm going to get round to, if we want to move that along, then we need every brain out there. Okay? And yeah, so I'm coming to the end of the things, but this is one of the things which happen with fungi. This is the only Latin name I hope I've used tonight. And this is a thing called Schizophyllum communi. And normally it's not very big. It can be less than 3 centimeters across, and it invariably only appears in years of hot, dry summers and droughts. And it loves lime trees. But here it is. So then, I'm just that's where that's it. Okay. But then we got these silage bags, which are green grass, which is then packed into these air-sealed bags and used for silage for the animals later on in the year and winter. But some of them get a tear, and there it is. So Schizophyllum found holes, well, a rip, and the medium in that bag was just as suitable as any tree. And they produce quite big fruit bodies as well. So it's even more ideal than a tree for this particular mushroom. Mushrooms, I think, basically, whatever you ask, nobody can laugh at you, because we don't know. I think it's a fascinating thing. And these are the sort of questions that you can ask. So I'm coming to the end of it, but this is one very quickly for us to think about. But this is some of the research which has been done with mycorrhizal fungi. Now, if you look at the red line on the left of the picture, it goes into what looks like a bush. So it's attached to the tree, it's mycorrhiza, but that lump is rock, that's granite. And the Swedish scientists have found that the mycelium taps into the granite, exudes chemicals which dissolve the granite, and give them to the mycorrhiza, which then transfer them to the tree. So it's a very, very sophisticated way of what I call recycling. So it's a recycler. But imagine they now think that the major erosion of many of these rocks is fungi and bacteria. Yeah, so I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought, well, they've now found that the mycelium of mycorrhizas can rob the wood decayers. So they punch into the wood decay mycelium and rob them of minerals and nutrients. So I thought a lot about that, and I thought, why does the fungi stop there? Could it be that the fungi that tap into the wood decay fungi, actually the tree gives the wood decay fungi minerals and nutrients and sugars and water. So in other words, it's feeding, they're both feeding each other. So the recyclers get fed by the tree which they're feeding. So the transference of minerals and nutrients and whatever is all three-way. So it's only a matter of time before some mycologist is going to find it. And here it is. I'm trying to show it there. So you've got recycling of the rock, and on the other side, the recycling of a dying tree. Yeah, so I'm having great problems, and this is you again. Great problems with the numbers game, because everybody wants to plant 1 million trees. And 1 million trees will not produce in any way the amount of carbon capture that you get from open grown trees. Open grown trees are huge, and the urban trees, of course, are huge solar domes. So they're capturing, and they go on capturing for 400 years. So what I think is that in the numbers game and the politicians and all that, and the people that believe in forests, is they were taught Red Riding Hood as a nursery rhyme when they were kids. And you can see the big bag wolf just behind her. So next time you go out planting trees, try and point out that you only want a tree every 10 to 15 meters, so it makes a tree, but spend the time planting the thing properly, so you get a tree. And you are the tree carers of the open grown tree, not foresters. That is your responsibility. So of all the people that should be out there and encouraging the urban tree, which is an open grown tree, it's you. Because you can say to these councillors and people like that, and they puff their little chest out when you say, that tree is a solar panel. And just see what happens. And you'll switch them on, because it's common sense. So remember, you are the custodians of the open grown tree. Yes, please. And this is something I came up with, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, in the 80s. And it still stands good. And this is something which in the UK we can be proud of, because there's many of the professional arborists now that understand this system and are doing it. And Neville came up with a system of doing it, and maybe it's been developed now different ways, but at least he put pen to paper and put something down about the aging process of our old trees. And we are the owners of those, although we do have a lot to do now, or we have had a lot to do with the Spanish for many years. And they're the other country which have got lots of old trees. So remember, you are responsible for these trees. Yep. So there's lots of going on now, about pests and diseases. But I don't understand that, because I've spent my life as a technician in pests and diseases, and we knew the years that some of these so-called pests and diseases were going to come, because it's only 19 miles of water. It's nothing to most organisms, literally nothing. So this is what you're being preached, you know, oh, and take it all with a pinch of salt. And there you go. Go back. So I think there's one more. And yeah, I like to finish up with this one because I think it helps you people, because you're looking at trees. In most cases, you're trying to do what's best for the tree. It's you are responsible for them. So you're trying to do the best. But stop and think that nature does not adhere to man-made constructs and laws. And if we start at that point, so you look at everything and say, well, this is what they say, but is it what it should be? Then I think we can start to move things along. But it comes from you, because the book that's been produced is, as John said, I paid for everything, and it's my contribution to the arboricultural world to show my gratitude for the way you've treated me, and if you like, care about our trees, because we are the major custodian of most of the old trees left in Europe. And so thank you very much for doing that. So I produced a book. I hope you buy it. But in the meantime, there's another one coming out, which was written before COVID, actually. So that's going to be done. And in the meantime, Kevin Frediani is going to head up the next book, or the most important one for the arboricultural world, because it's based on arboriculture. It's going to be called, well, I'm going to call it open tree ecology. One word, open tree ecology, because it's going to be the tree ecology of open grown trees, not foresters. So you will be able to put after your name ecologist, because everybody else does it and everybody bows down to ecologists. But the ecologists today that are spouting anything about trees know absolutely nothing. And on top of that, don't pay them. So we're going to do that. And hopefully we're going to talk to John about setting up some webinars when we get some authors together. In fact, Neville Fay has already done quite a lot of work on, I think he calls it conservation ecology. But he's done a lot of work, so he will obviously have a chapter in the book. And then we're going to be coming out to scientists and ecologists and arborists and saying, write us a chapter, because it's your book. It's your book. Nobody can do it other than you. It's your book. There aren't people out there any better than you. So if you start thinking that you're it, then you've got to do something. And Sarah Bryce, who writes or with Simon that write the Arb Mag, say how people are queuing up now to write articles because they're coming on board. They're recognizing and they have the confidence to actually say, I can do something. And you're it. And if you don't do it, I shall get annoyed. Because don't just rely on other people. It's your profession, your industry. So why aren't you doing it? I mean, what really pissed me off is when Jill started the tree hunt, the ancient tree hunt. We don't get any results on there or measurements from arborists. And it's your profession, and you don't do it. You're a lot of apathetic. I don't know what to call you, but I mean, you'd be jumping to do it every time you see a nice big old tree. Put a tape round it, measure it, and put it straight on the internet. You've done it. 5 minutes. It's why you're having a fag or a cup of tea, but you don't do it. I don't understand it, and that's why I'm having a go at you now. So Kevin, we will be coming up with something shortly, and you can start doing it now if you like, saying to us, what would you like if we're going to write a book on tree ecology, which is targeting arborists? What sort of subjects do you think? What do you feel? So that we do it. It's your property. It's your ownership. You're doing it. So what's this? That's about it, I think, apart from saying, no, I'm not going to wish you a Merry Christmas. A shower of bloody people don't do enough. Anyway, yes, sir. So what do you reckon now, John?
Yes, sir. That's all I have to say. Outstanding, Ted, as always. Abdul's just said, what time does the webinar finish? And I said, I'm not sure it's ever going to finish, Abdul. But it's perfect, as always. Ted, we love you and everybody loves you. Thank you very much indeed. We've got lots of questions in. We're going to work through as many questions as we can. We've got like 20 minutes or something like that.
Right.
We've got about 20 minutes, and we've been known to go over a little bit, but we'll see how it goes.
I don't know if I want to talk much to these apathetic people.
Well, you haven't talked much at all,
No,
Ted. The last 4 hours has flown by. I was clean shaven when we started this. So what I'd like to do, Ted, is you've always been really encouraging throughout your career of sort of younger people coming through. And we've had a couple of questions from some younger people and some students that I'd like to focus on to begin with. So I'd like to go first with a question, sort of a statement really, but from Edward, who is at the Royal Agricultural University in Cirencester. I'm a bit biased here because I was giving a talk at the Royal Ag yesterday and I met Edward, so thank you very much for coming along, Edward. And Edward is going to be doing a dissertation based on ancient woodland ecology, and I said I thought that he might find your talk interesting. And I guess any sort of tips about ancient woodland ecology as a research area? What would you say to Edward? Edward's got an opportunity to listen to you talking to him about what to do for his dissertation. Ted, go.
Well, we don't like woodland. We are open grown trees, and a vast area of Europe after the last ice age was wood pasture, because very, very few animals live in woodland. And the biggest problem for us has been the poles in Bielorussia, where they say the bison live. Oh, the romantic bison. They don't. They do live in there. They go in there in the daytime to avoid the tourists. But if they give a chance, they're out in the wood pasture and the grassland. There's very little that lives in woodland. So if I was you, my friend, write a dissertation on the benefits of wood pasture. Because remember, all your fruit trees, they're not in woodland. And fruit trees, I mean even fruit trees that just feed animals, like acorns and sweet chestnuts and things like that. They are open grown trees. So if you want to do something on open grown trees and wood pasture, and start by looking at the AA whatever, because they've got a printed version of a book by a man called Franz Vera. Have a look at Franz Vera. So the AA is already encouraging people to look at what he discovered a few years ago. Try that.
Thank you, Ted. I thought you were going to mention that, so I put it in the chat. Franz Vera, The Dynamic European Forest. Absolutely fantastic. Yes. So we've had a question from, it says anonymous attendee. I don't think there's deliberate anonymity, but we've had a question saying, what sector of tree work do you most want to see young people getting involved in? I'm an ecology student wanting to make as much of a difference as possible, but heavy labour isn't an option due to health reasons. And then this person says, thank you for being a lifelong steward of the landscape. So what would you suggest to someone who's kind of getting into it, but can't necessarily do the sort of the physical side of things?
Well, carry on raising the profile of the UK being the major custodian of many of the old trees in Britain, different species, and their value. And if you like, do more and more research into the value of these trees, because just recently I was reading something about the history of Windsor, and in that, this is going back to the 1600s, 400 years ago, and the guy's saying he's walking through young oak woodland, and there are doddards scattered in this. Now, the are the old trees. So parkland and got planted up with young oaks, but they left the old trees. So what you've got there is you've got biological continuity, and that is essential when you see just how much of biological continuity of the soil, whatever it is, has been destroyed in the world. The soil of the world is, I can't use the word because there are ladies in the audience, but the soil of the world is in a very, very bad way. And if you saw the floods at Valencia, what was going down the river was water, yes, but really it was mud. And that was the topsoil of Spain. And what I say in Britain is the landowner may own the land, but the soil belongs to the nation. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ted. One more question from well, I say a young person. I'm not sure if it is a young person, but somebody looking to join our community. Another anonymous attendee. I'm not sure if it's the same anonymous attendee, but anyway. As a precursor to this question, what I'll say, Ted, is what I loved about your book, about Tree Time, so much, and this is not an advert for it, but it felt like on every page you posed a question that could be a PhD, basically, and I love the fact that there were so many questions in there. And somebody's asked, what would you say is the one most useful thing a PhD student could spend 3.5 years studying? Of all of those ideas you sort of threw at the wall for your book, what's the one thing you'd like to see somebody actually investigating for a PhD?
Anyone that they prefer to do. I don't think I've got one. I wouldn't like to make one more important than any other. I mean, I would need time to think about it anyway, unless Jill, you want to answer him? Where are you? Jill, I can't hear you. You'll have to come and do it in the screen here. She's not coming.
I feel like it's a film. I feel like it's a film, and the twist is going to be that Jill's not in your flat at all. Jill's not real. You're just shouting at Jill, and the reason you can't hear her is because she's not there today.
I think the question to that person is read my book and pick one out of it.
That is sound advice, probably not that helpful, but read the book, open it at random, pick a page, and you will find something on there that will give you a fantastic idea. And if in doubt, do what Ted does and ask Jill. Steve has said, it's not a question, Steve just wanted to say thank you to Ted for pointing him to Izzy's tree book on wilding at Knepp Hall, one of the most inspiring, hope-filled books I've ever read. Thank you, Steve. Ted, I don't know if you've got anything additional you want to talk about Knepp or Izzy?
Well, we're in the process. Franz Vera, who we are disciples of Franz Vera, not necessarily totally in the tree world because he was about the landscape and all the rest of it. But he's not getting younger, and we would like to get him over here. And if we were, then it would be for a conference at Knepp. So that is one of their challenges at the moment, to try and get him over, or to have him on your webinar or a special webinar and actually get him talking, because he's like me, he's getting old. And yeah.
Thank you, Ted. A question from Barry, or sort of a statement and then a question. Barry's saying, why don't arbs forget the chainsaw and just use compost extracts and teas on and around trees? Barry then says, I suggest the chainsaw ruined arboriculture. What do you think? That feels like the subject of a 2-hour webinar, but did the chainsaw ruin arboriculture, Ted?
Well, you saw the pictures of what the beavers do, and I would coppice in the old days with a billock, and it obviously worked. The thing I want to write something on for the mag is stub ends. So maybe watch this space, and I'll write something on stub ends in the ARB mag. And of course, the ARB mag is incredible now. And anybody with an idea that you've just had, I've just had a friend of mine, an arborist, that's been working on marsh tits, willow tits, and he's been creating cavities for them because they're very rare, and they're getting rarer because the nest cavities are not so available as they used to be. So he's been doing it with a chainsaw. So the next place that should go is in the mag, because I mean I've been doing it for years. You'll see pictures in my book of what the creativity side of arbs. And I remember going back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and an arb rang me up and saying how he found bees in a limb which he was about to cut off. So what he did was he roped it and put his t-shirt in one end and cut the limb off and swung the limb round the back of the tree away from the bus stop and stuck it up there again. And this just is, I hate to use the word, but it's just an ordinary arb that was wanted to see wildlife and not destroy wildlife. And they were doing it. And that's one of the things that appeals to me about arborists. They're not just, well, I hope not, in it for money. Yes, sir. One more, I suppose.
I can assure you, Ted, that arborists are not in it for the money. We're not in it for the money or the glory. But, okay, we've probably got time for a couple more. We've got like 8 minutes left. We can move through this.
Oh, yeah.
Danny, well, I should say Bill's pointed out that Franz Vera is only 75 years old, so he is a mere stripling, and I'm sure we've got plenty of time to get him on to do another webinar. Danny says, having had your feet in an academic career as a plant pathologist, what interest was it that made you focus on trees, and ancient trees in particular, as opposed to forestry or agriculture or another sector? Why was it trees that you were particularly interested in?
Well, I lived literally half a mile from old trees. And then when Mrs. Thatcher gave me the big E from the uni, she destroyed universities, by the way. I moved on and got a job at Windsor as their conservation liaison officer. And so I was bang straight into trees, but in the best place in the world. So I've landed on my feet from that point of view. So yes, and it was waiting to happen. But I have to admit that when we started the Ancient Tree Forum, at the same time, Natural England, who was the civil service conservation body, they had just started the Veteran Tree Initiative. And I hate that word veteran. But anyway, they had just started that. And people like Neville Fay, myself, David Lonsdale would go round. They organised visits to different parts of Britain where there were old trees. And we go and meet and talk and go out on walks with people to raise the awareness of ancient trees. And it was one of the best grounding for us in the Ancient Tree Forum, which of course has moved on now. And it's the new Ancient Tree Forum now. It's not the old guard, which was mainly Thinking Arbs. So we've moved on and now have the Thinking Arbs, which is due for a couple of meetings next year now. Yes, sir.
Because you mentioned her, excuse me, I was flicking through your book trying to find my favourite photo in the book of you with a portrait of Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't find it. I don't want to say her name 3 times. If you say her name 3 times in front of the mirror, you know she appears behind you. But yeah. I can't see it. It's in there somewhere. If you've got the book, have a little look at it. It's a wonderful image of Ted paying his respects to one of our top 100 or 200 prime ministers. So Mark says, outstanding talk, Ted. I really enjoyed your attitude of thinking outside the box. I've been in tree work for over 40 years and work for government now. As an ISA certified arborist, I'm supposed to despise topping big trees, but I see a lot of farmers that top their oaks and they sucker back out and survive the high winds pretty well. I feel like an old top tree is worth more than no tree at all. Now, I guess there's not a question as such from Mark there, but there's sometimes a bit of a distinction, isn't there, or confusion between topping and pollarding. And I wonder if if the last couple of minutes we've got on the webinar, you want to talk a bit about topping and pollarding, because especially for our American colleagues, we've got many American colleagues watching, trying to find perhaps some kind of solace in the world for events that might have happened to them today. What is they don't like pollarding. What's the deal with the difference?
Have you shot Trump yet?
I don't think we can do Trump and Thatcher in the same webinar. It would be too much for me.
So pollarding, for some reason, is something which the first settlers to go to North America, they didn't take it. But all over Europe, pollarding is when you cut young trees very early on, maybe as thick as a broomstick, and they sprout other branches, and then those branches and limbs get used for various purposes. They were certainly very important for feeding animals. They were certainly important for building ships, because you could actually bend them to the shape you wanted them. So pollarding was a source of cutting trees, but you didn't cut them down, because obviously if you cut them down, unless they're coppiced, they're finished. So this was a way of keeping trees going. And one of the best examples, I think, which is my own one, is that when we look in the history of trees, we find there's a point where lime trees, in America they call them bass trees, suddenly more or less disappeared. And there's been various suggestions as to why this happened. And I thought of one, and it was when we got the bark, which is the bast, to make shoes and shirts and things like that, and rope. So people started cutting down the trees to get the bark, to make the rope, to make the shirts, to make the shoes. And then in the meantime, and we can still see these trees here in the UK, where they left them and cut them as pollards. So you got a supply of bass bark off the poles, as they're called, later on, every 15 years. But for some reason, it never went to the USA. And I see it ought to return. And certainly from the point of view of carbon capture and stuff like that, where you can actually form the tree, the open grown tree. So look out for our books. The one's out now, you need it. You definitely need it. And please think out of the box. It's not that the work that's being done is not correct, but it's, can you, in your experience, take it further or ask a question? And and have you shot Trump yet?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ted. We've got mixed opinions, much like an election itself, going on in the chat. So we won't dwell on politics, because there's no right answer other than it's a terrible, terrible day. But thank you, Ted. You're wonderful. Thank you to all of you lovely people in the audience. You're all wonderful, beautiful people. We'll be sending all of the questions and all of the chat to Ted, so he gets to have a good look at things afterwards. Please do join us next week for Jeremy Barrell's webinar, the return of Jeremy Barrell. It's going to be a really, really good one. And then afterwards is phytoremediation in Milan and Empire Forestry in colonial Jamaica, which will be really, really great. So thank you, Ted. Thank you, Jill, in the background somewhere, maybe. Who knows? Thank you all. Take care, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.